see with me is the Labour MP and Shadow Justice Secretary, Richard Burgon. You must be very pleased with how it's gone tonight, but why are you not picking up the gauntlet for a general election?
Well, we want a general election as soon as possible, whilst also stopping a no-deal Brexit. And the thing that puts us in the position we are in is that you can't trust a word that Boris Johnson says. If he says that a general election can be held at a date which means we don't crash out with a no-deal Brexit, then we can't believe him. That's the reality. He could change the date.
So you want it set down in law?
What we want is it to be bolted down.
How would you do that?
Legally binding. We're going to look at every possible parliamentary procedure to do that, to make it legally watertight. Because for
so
us,
if there were, let me put it to you, if there was a bill that said, notwithstanding the terms of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, we are having an election on the 14th of October, it was set down in legislation and everybody voted for it with a simple majority, would that suffice?
If there was no wriggle room for this deeply untrustworthy Prime Minister, because we've actually heard tonight rumours that even if a law is passed by Parliament or legislation is passed by Parliament, Boris Johnson is considering not taking it to Buckingham Palace to have it signed off as a law. That's the kind of territory we're in. He's thinking the unthinkable in order to get his way, which is a no-deal Brexit, which is when he was one of the leaders of the Leave campaign, he said wouldn't happen. So we want it bolting down, that a no-deal Brexit can't occur. And once that's done, we want a general election as soon as possible, because we don't want to stop.
And you would be happy for that general election to be on the 14th of October if it was set down in stone?
We're happy for it to be as soon as possible, as long as it's bolted down, it's wriggle room free for Boris Johnson to
But the 14th would suit you?
Well, the sooner the better, as long as...
The only reason I ask is because if he won the election and was returned with a majority, whatever you secure in the coming days would be immaterial, because you can't bind the hands of a future government. He could repeal anything that you put forward and take us out with no deal anyway.
Well, we're Democrats. I'm not sure that Boris Johnson is behaving like a Democrat, but you raise the point of the uncertain outcome of a general election. I'll tell you now, I'm confident that we'll win a general election. I think the mask is slipping on the rigged system we've got. I think the mask of Boris Johnson is slipping. He's something a bit more sinister than a bumbling, amusing bloke that's been on Have I Got News for You, and I now think we're seeing that. We're seeing that in so many ways. He will use any trick in the book to get a no-deal Brexit because he wants a sweetheart deal with Donald Trump. And whether people voted Leave or whether they voted Remain, the elite, personified Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, hold people in contempt.
So if you get this legislation through this week, which to all intents and purposes you will, what is the delay for?
The delay, if we get it through, is the fact that Boris Johnson will be bringing a vote about a general election, but a vote that's not at this stage amendable, a vote where he can have the prerogative to change the date of that general election. I would not trust Boris Johnson in any way whatsoever, and I certainly wouldn't trust Boris Johnson not to say that an election is in the middle of October and then use his prerogative to change the date so that during the general election campaign we crash out the European Union.
But what I'm saying is that you want, under legislation that's been put forward, I understand that you want to delay until January 31st. What I'm saying is, what is that 3-month period for?
Well, that could involve further negotiations, that could involve a better deal, that could involve...
Which you would get involved with the Labour Party, cross-party, get involved in the negotiation?
Well, we're happy to work with whoever, cross-party and the public at large, in order to sort out this Conservative-created mess, this Boris Johnson-created disaster that we're now facing.
What's on the Labour Party manifesto when you go to an election?
Well, at the last manifesto, I need to remind people of this, at the last manifesto we did say that we would do everything in our power to stop a no-deal Brexit. That's what we're doing now. We now
But are you Remain or are you a Brexit party?
We now support a public vote on any deal. And against a Boris Johnson deal, not that he's going to get one, we'd campaign to Remain. Against a no-deal Brexit, we'd campaign to Remain.
So you'd be campaigning for a referendum, and which way would the Labour Party be going on a referendum? Would you be campaigning in that referendum to Remain or to take the deal, whatever that deal is?
Well, if it's a Boris Johnson deal, but he's not going to get one, by the way, but if it's a Boris Johnson deal, we'd be campaigning for Remain, and certainly against no deal, we'd be campaigning for Remain as well. But I want to make this clear.
If it's you doing the negotiating, if you are returned with a majority on October 14th, are you going back to Brussels seeking a deal, or are you looking to repeal or push for a referendum? And John McDonnell was here not that long ago talking to me saying we would, in that circumstance, be campaigning for Remain.
Yeah, well, if we got into government, if a new deal was offered after negotiations with the EU...
But why would the EU negotiate with Labour if, to all intents and purposes, you're going to Remain anyway?
Because we would put...
What would be the point of getting a new deal if you wanted to Remain?
Because it would be in the EU's interests as well, other countries' interests, in our country's economic interests as well. But we would put it to the public, a credible leave option and a credible Remain
So you would
option.
go to Brussels and tell them that you want to Remain, but give us a deal to leave?
No. I think we're also, one, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but two, I think we're underestimating what's going on at the moment. This isn't just about Brexit. This isn't about whether people voted leave or Remain. We won't stop, by the way, with stopping a no-deal Brexit. Once we've stopped a no-deal Brexit, we want to fundamentally and irreversibly transform for the better our society with the
Well, I understand that, but what I'm asking you is...
with free education.
But you've just told me that you want to go back to Brussels and fight for a new deal, but then in a referendum you would campaign for Remain. That doesn't really make sense.
I think we'll win the next general election, whenever it will be. When we win that general election, of course we'll talk to our partners in the European Union. If a better deal is offered, or any deal, we will put that to the public with Remain and that better deal. But we think now, as the situation is, we're facing the real threat of disaster capitalism, really. No deal Brexit being used as a smokescreen to do sweetheart deals with Donald Trump, which will really affect living standards in our National Health Service and public services. We are clear. They said, Boris Johnson said, and we all know how trustworthy he is, he said that if the country voted to leave, don't worry, it won't be a no-deal Brexit. He's now using every trick in the book to anti-democratically impose a no-deal Brexit. Remain is better than a no-deal Brexit. Remain is better than the deal that Boris Johnson is not going to get.
OK, Richard Burgon, really grateful for your time. Thank you very much.